Want to talk about the big story today, and that is E3 potentially being canceled. We've got reports. Our sister site GameSpot has reported that the video game conference in Los Angeles is set to be canceled. But this is just the latest in a series of conferences and public events that have been canceled over concerns about coronavirus. Now, Laura, it's fortuitous that you're here because you actually attended one of the few conferences that went on despite the concerns. That is the RSA Security Conference, the one that happened to actually have someone with coronavirus attend. So share some of your perspective on that, and why it's important for some of these conferences to be canceled.
Yeah, so at the time of the RSA conference, there hadn't been any community transmitted cases in San Francisco. It didn't seem like it was an issue in San Francisco. But of course, when you bring, 10, 20, 30,000 people into the same place from all over the world, that increases the chances of transmission. And that seems to be what happened. According to Bloomberg, one of the people who had COVID-19 while at the conference got sick on the last day of the conference and had to be put into a medically induced coma more recently. So it was quite serious. So knowing that someone at the conference was, just about to be symptomatic, that's pretty worrying when I look back. And I'm pretty sure that everyone who attended the conference is also, reassuring themselves, I know I washed my hands a lot. I know it's unlikely that I contacted this one person, but it's still pretty disconcerting to know that that possibility is out there.
Absolutely. And I think when Mobile World Congress, that phone trade show in Barcelona, it got canceled. There were a lot of critics who said, this is a bit of an overreaction. I think a lot of folks who made the decision to pull the trigger on canceling these conferences are probably breathing a sigh of relief, knowing that this the worst case scenario pretty much happened at RSA. And so you can imagine this is going to continue to be a thing. Conferences like Google I/O are being canceled. Apple's WWDC is just a few months. We don't know what's going on with that, but I suspect that'll get canceled as well. So it's just sort of the latest in this string. And just bring it back to the sort of video game world. E3, there were some questions about sort of the value of E3, as it were. Sony had already said they were planning to pull out of the conference completely to give their PlayStation 5 a bit more of its own limelight. And Microsoft has always kind of traditionally held a separate event. And so, Google had a big presence with Stadia there last year, but it wasn't actually at the show. It was sort of off-site. So there's been a lot of questions about the value of E3 even before the coronavirus concerns hit. But obviously, paired with these fears and just sort of the need to be cautious about things, it does make a lot of sense for E3 to get canceled. So
yeah, it's just part of the huge impact of this disease, that not only are people really getting sick, and it's scary to see, whether or not we can contain it, but there's this huge economic impact on businesses that are canceling these major events.
Coming in, we have some questions about E3 from our live audience. Timothy says, any canceled major conferences will definitely affect the local economy. Will this make companies change the meaning of a conference and move towards that kind of virtual conference? And being that it's gaming, how many do we think we're going to try to jump ship and do AR, VR streaming?
AR, VR streaming, I think we're ways off from that, just because if they streamed in AR, VR, the audience for that would be so tiny, it wouldn't really be worth it right now. But I do agree that remote streaming will probably be an option. I mean, all of this, if nothing else, this is really pushing folks to, one, work remotely, and two, for companies looking to make announcements or have a big presence at a conference, really look at web streaming, live streaming options for disseminating their announcements. So I expect, if Microsoft was expected to share a lot more news on Series X. We're expecting details of that. I suspect Microsoft will still want to share those details. It'll just be through a different medium, through some sort of online broadcast. They were already doing this stuff online anyway, but they're probably just going to focus a lot more of their resources into making that presentation as really as palatable for online viewers as opposed to folks on the ground. So a lot more of that. I think there's a lot more thinking that's going to go into that presentation.
And in that same mindset, do we think this is going to have longer term implications? Are we going to see more and more splinter conferences where maybe instead of having a giant E3, we see more Nintendo Directs, or it's, would Sony do that kind of thing? We've seen this starting to happen, like here at CNET and Roadshow, we covered the Geneva Auto Show, which got canceled, and then every automaker went and broke out and did their own individual stream, because it's not that hard to do. The technology's there. Do we think that that's going to be kind of a new trend set going forward in lieu of these, you know, hopefully we don't spend the rest of our lives in an epidemic, but, you know, who knows? Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's something companies are going to seriously consider. The biggies like Sony, they can afford to go out and have their own event. They're going to hold a PlayStation 5 event sometime later this year. People are going to show up, guaranteed, right? I think it's more the smaller publishers, the independent game makers that would need something like E3 as a platform for them to make their announcements, right? Because that's what brings in the crowds. So there's still some value in having these conferences, but I agree. Like some of these bigger companies will start thinking more seriously about whether or not to do more of this stuff online. Like you said, Nintendo already does it with Nintendo Direct. You know, they've always had a token presence at E3, but it hasn't really been a legit one. Like they do most of their announcements online or live streamed.
Yeah, it'd be interesting just to see where this trend kind of does take us. But thanks, everybody, for your input on the topic. Hopefully we'll have some more definitive answers and coverage and figure out how many of these streams that we're going to have to break out here at CNET just to pick them up all over again.